Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
I hope that everyone is doing well today. Good afternoon, Christian, Mr. Gant. Good afternoon. Do we have our other commissioners on?
I believe it's just I haven't heard from Commissioner Sykes, but I believe it just you for now. Let me rephrase. I haven't heard from Commissioner Sykes um, yet, so I believe it'll just be you.
I hope that everyone is doing well today. I hope that everyone is safe and healthy. It is 3:30, and I do want to honor everyone's time. Today is the first day of June. And although there is a lot of work that we have to do, and there's a lot of work ahead of us, we certainly have a lot of things to celebrate and a lot of things to be grateful for. So as we get started with today's meeting and the weight of today's meeting, there are several presentations on. I just want everyone to just take a moment to reflect on some of the things that you are grateful for. Um, and thinking about those things, and then also thinking about the things that answer your why. Why do you do what you do every day? Why do we continue to have these meetings for the sake of our children, right? I just want us to take that moment and to center ourselves in that as we move forward with the work today. I see a few others have joined us. As I know that there are commissioners that we're still waiting for. Hello, Chief Dabrowski. It is good to see you, and it looks like a bunch of us are on, and I believe that Dr. Brooks is starting us today. I just want to say happy June to everyone again. June is Black Music Month, and the musician that I am, I'm going to acknowledge that, where we celebrate the contributions of Black Americans to the world of music this month, in addition to this being Pride Month. So happy Pride to everyone that is in our meeting today and in our listening audience. And then we also know that June is inclusive of Father's Day and Juneteenth. There are a lot of things for us to celebrate and for us to be grateful for. And hopefully that centers and grounds us in the work that we move forward with. Beginning today with Dr. Brooks's special education update. I know that it is Dr. Brooks and probably Mr. Tucker who will be presenting for us today. But Dr. Brooks, we're ready if you are.
So thank you for that, Commissioner McFadden, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Brooks, the Executive Director of Special Education, and I will be presenting today, but along with my colleagues from the Office of Special Education and the Office of Teaching and Learning. So you will hear from me as well as others as we provide a special education update for school year 2021. And I would like to say thank you, Mr. Tucker, who will be sharing the slides. I could not do this work without Mr. Tucker, who is my right and left hand. So I do want to acknowledge him for this. So thank you, Mr. Tucker. And next slide. So our agenda, I'm going to share with you who we are, who are our students that are receiving specially designed instruction. So I'll give you a little bit about our demographics. I'm going to share with you our alignment, special education priorities, with how they're aligned to Maryland State Department of Education imperatives for our students with disabilities. We're going to talk about our reopening supports, how we supported our students in the fall and then throughout the school year. We're going to talk about those imperatives around narrowing the gap, and that's when you will hear from colleagues both in the Office of Special Education as well as Teaching and Learning. And then we're going to talk about the work ahead. So I just wanted to be able to provide that framing as we begin to present this afternoon. Next slide, please. So who are we? That are receiving specially designed instruction. About almost 15% of our students currently are receiving specially designed instruction here in city schools. The largest percentage of those students have been identified as students with other health impairment, which includes those students who are have attention deficit disorder or attention hyperdeficit disorder, as well as students who have a specific learning disability in a particular area. It could be reading or math, or have an intellectual disability. So those are our three highest disability codes that our students have. We have about 58% of our students are receiving their specially designed instruction in the general education setting, LREA, 80% or more of the time with their typical peers. I do want to call out that the state target is 70.9%. So we have not met the state target, but we are improving in where our students are receiving that specially designed instruction. And you will hear a little bit later around some of the work that we are doing to support our teachers as well as our students so that they can begin to receive that direct instruction with their typical peers. Next slide, please. So as you heard me say, there are special education imperatives that come from MSDE and then our special education priorities. So I just want to take a moment to let you know how these are actually aligned. So many of you have seen the slide with our special education priorities where we are educating students in their least restrictive environment. And again, I want to call out where you see the word there is bolded and underlined because as we know, a student who has an IEP is individualized. So we want to make sure that as teams are making informed decisions, we're using the students' data to inform where they're receiving their instruction. Also ensuring that regardless of a student's disability or where they're receiving their specially designed instruction, they have access to high quality instruction and services. And in doing so, making sure they're receiving their services in their least restrictive environment, as well as having access to high quality instruction and services, that we're closing that achievement gap. Those priorities are aligned to the imperative of access, equity, and progress. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later in our presentation. The other imperatives of secondary transition as well as early childhood aligns with where those students are receiving their services and that high quality instruction and service. And so when we talk about transition, secondary transition, how are we preparing students for the world of work, what that instruction and services look like when we talk about workforce development, you'll hear more about that alignment, and then also some of the inclusive work that is happening in early childhood. Along the bottom, you will see how we're actually providing supports to schools and using the data to inform this work. So we have special education stat, where we are collaborating with multiple offices across the district to unpack the data. So we look and work with our Office of Achievement and Accountability, our schools office, teaching and learning, our student wholeness and college and career ready to really unpack the district data as well as our CLN data and our school data to make informed data managed decisions. And so that helps us then to really inform what our professional development looks like for multiple stakeholders, to include our families when we have our CCAC meetings, to include our administrators, our IEP chairs, our general educators, special educators, and related service providers. And then from there, really tearing down what that support looks like for those students in that building. And as you look at the MSDE imperatives, you see around the circle the strategic collaboration, which you just heard me speak about in our stat. The family partnerships, when we talk about the professional development that we provide for our CCAC, which is our family partners. The data-informed decision, when we're unpacking that data during STAT meeting with the multiple offices and using those evidence-based practices. And then the professional learning and the professional development that we're providing to our stakeholders. So I wanted to be able to provide this slide so that you can see that our special education priorities are aligned with the MSDE imperatives. Next slide, please. So as we reopen schools this fall, I want to share with you just some of the work that the Office of Special Education did to support the reopening, beginning with summer PD that we provided to staff to be able to support students as they were coming back in. So we provided professional development for our staff around amending students' IEPs that reflected what the IEP implementation will look like for both in-person as well as virtual. We also provided professional development around health and safety protocols as we begin to bring some staff back. For students, we also partnered with our non-public partners to ensure that all students, all Baltimore City students, to include those students that were receiving their services in a non-public, had access to virtual instruction. So we provided, made sure they had laptops, also hotspots, so that they were receiving FAPE, free appropriate public education, even in their non-public setting. And then for our families, we continue to have virtual CCAC meetings and IP and 504 meetings. And with that, we saw an increase in parent participation. Parents were able to remove the barrier of transportation to try to come out to those CCAC meetings, as well as parents said that they were able to log in or use their telephones to participate at times when they were unable to participate. And so we really got a lot of positive feedback from our parents. Next slide, please. So some examples of the work that we were able to hear and participate in. We were able to provide guidance for our secondary transition supports to our schools. And we were actually acknowledged by the Council of Great City Schools as having best practices in the development of our continuity of learning plans, as well as our communication to parents and the implementation of the continuity of learning plans, and having parents understand what it means to have virtual instruction for our students with disabilities. So what you see on here, just some of the slides, and on this slide, excuse me, is just some of the work that the Office of Special Education was able to push in and provide support around. Next slide, please. So again, as we reopened schools in September, the Office of Special Education was actually able to support the reopening of some in-person direct instruction for some of our most vulnerable students. And so you'll see here that there were actually 6 self-contained classrooms in some of our traditional schools that we were able to open up and provide in-person instruction with a special educator, paraeducator, as well as related service providers. And I want to specifically call out Dorothy I. Height, because this was actually a school where we provided in-person instruction for our students that were receiving deaf, hard of hearing support. I also want to call out Pimlico Middle School, because this is also Pimlico Elementary Middle School, excuse me, because this is also a school where we actually had our middle grade students return in person, and we were able to provide that direct instruction with a special educator as well as their related service provider. We also were able to provide direct instruction at 2 of our separate public day schools, George McMecken and Claremont. So we were able to provide these supports, one on the west side and one on the east side. As the quarter continued, we were able to increase those in-person supports as families were able to see that we were able to provide this in-person support safely for our students, as well as the students getting direct instruction from their special educator. We had more parents ask for their children to be able to come in person, and we were able to increase from 2 separate public day schools to all 6 of our separate public day schools. So by the end of the first quarter, we had increased to 107 students with disabilities coming in person to receive their in-person support and instruction from their related service provider and their special educator. The next slide, you're actually going to see an example of what that in-person instruction looked like at one of our schools. And so, Mr. Tucker, if you could show us, please, what that looked like. We're at elementary middle. What we actually saw today were our middle school students that are receiving specially designed instruction in person. And we have 2 teachers, 2 different classrooms that have volunteered to come in to provide in-person support. And instead of the students moving, the teachers actually move.
You know, they said to me, one of them in particular said, you know, Ms. Barnett, I need to see them. I need to see them. It's a lot, and they need to be in front of me. And those students are here. They come every day, and you can see the growth with them. And also the students who are at home still watching, they're still able to reach all of the students.
We want to ensure that all students and all staff are following all the safe and healthy protocols that have been put in place by city schools. What is differentiated is meeting the individual needs of students. So based upon the individual needs that students have, we are meeting those needs based upon what is identified on the student's IEPs. Being able to provide this opportunity, they have those in-person supports provided by their certified special educator.
Have students in the building and to see them learning, see it possible, everything is done safely, they miss it. So it's very encouraging to see that it's possible and that it's happening.
So again, this actually was one of our schools that we were able to open in September. And so because we were able to film this and show this to some of our families, also was able to show this to some of our other principals, we began to have families and other schools reach out to say, how can we begin to bring back additional students into our school communities as well as families? And so as we began to move into the winter and spring, we were able to increase the number of students that were receiving in-person instruction. Next slide, please, Mr. Tucker. And so throughout the winter and spring, we were able again to increase the number of students with disabilities receiving in-person instruction to provide that support across the full continuum. So not just students that were receiving their specially designed instruction in LREC, which is a self-contained environment, or LREF, our separate public day schools, but for our students that were receiving their instruction with their typical peers in LRE A and B. And as you can see on this slide, the numbers and the percentages increased for our students that were receiving those supports in person. We were also able to provide additional in-person mental health supports to include our crisis team supports for our students, both virtually as well as in person. For our families, we were able to provide additional supports around community resources, for food, for shelter, as well as engaging them continuously with our CCAC meeting and continuing with our virtual IEP and 504 meetings. And then for our staff, providing additional support for employee assistance programming, as well as continuing to provide those supports around technology, as well as ensuring that they had access to those accessibility tools so that our students were able to participate fully and engage fully in instruction, both virtually as well as in person. Next slide, please. So next, you're actually going to hear more about our assessment centers. We were able to open up assessment centers, and you're going to hear more about how we were able to accommodate our students with disabilities to receive in-person assessments.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a part of City Schools' initiative to provide in-person supports to students with disabilities, the Office of Special Education established assessment centers throughout the city of Baltimore. Our assessment centers open in October and operate on Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Each of our sites are equipped with a scheduler, site leads or managers, clinicians who conduct face-to-face assessments, and a nurse. Our nurses are our first point of contact with students and families, and they conduct screen checks of all our guests. They escort them to the waiting area, as well as reinforce our social distancing rules and guidelines. Our school-based IEP chairs are integral to the process because they interact with our parents and inform them of the assessment centers, the availability of appointments. They confirm appointments with the scheduler and ensure that our parents have all the necessary communication around the logistical information for arriving to the assessment center. Prior to the implementation of the assessment center, all staff were oriented to the assessment center operating procedures and required to complete the district's health and safety training. During the virtual phase, each site was able to offer a full array of assessments, and that also included providing assessments to our families who need bilingual supports. Currently, there have been approximately 1,600 appointments scheduled at the assessment center, and we have assessed over 900 students. Next slide, please. Make it next slide, please. Thank you. So the following slide just represents some of the mental health supports that were provided to all students, not just students with IEP services, but all students during the pandemic. If you look at the bulleted items, I'm going to highlight just a few of those supports. For example, Go Guardian. Our school social workers and school psychologists served as our lead responders on all Go Guardian alerts. They provide mental health supports. They reassure families and referrals with community resources. And they also follow up with student and families. As you may know, some of our Go Guardian alerts have increased significantly during remote learning due to the fact that all of our students have access to district devices. Our social workers also participated in attendant bus tours. During these attendance bus tours, they were part of our district-wide attendance initiatives, and they also re-engaged families around school attendance and additionally provided resources for those families who needed resources around barriers to attendance. We also had clinicians who participated in manning our attendance hotline. And during this time, our clinicians provided resources. They also followed up with families to identify barriers to school attendance. They also dropped off resources to homes. They assisted with navigating technology, connected families with outside resources, as well as provided parent workshops to assist families with navigating distant learning. Thank you, Macon. Next slide.
Thank you, Ms. Medley, for providing those updates. So next, again, I just wanted to frame this again. You're going to hear from staff from both the Office of Special Education as well as the Office of Teaching and Learning to actually provide you updates around the work that we have done to implement the imperatives, the MSDE imperatives. And again, those imperatives are early learning, secondary transition, and access, equity, and progress. And so you're going to hear some of the work that is actually taking place during the school year 2021, and then what we're going to be moving forward and doing for school year 21-22. So the next slide, you will actually be hearing more work around early childhood.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Crystal Francis. I'm the Director of Early Learning Programs, and thank you, Dr. Brooks, for giving us this time today. We wanted to talk a bit about the work that we have done during this school year. So we have really been focusing on the child outcome summary process in our early childhood classrooms. We have done training with our IEP chairs. We really wanted to make sure that we could create a visual document for families so that we could help explain this. Sometimes our IEP meetings can get overwhelming for our families. We're using a lot of big words and jargon. So we really wanted to help kind of break this process down. And we've continued to do professional development with our early learning teachers, general educators, and we're going to continue to focus on the related service providers who support our early childhood students. For the next upcoming school year and our 21-22 school year, we really want to put the focus on inclusion within our classrooms. In our preschool 3, 4, and 5 classrooms, we actually are doing really well with our inclusion and students being in LREA and spending the majority of their time with their general ed peers. So we're very excited about that, but we want to make sure that the experiences that our students are having once they're in general education is high quality. So we're going to be supporting our general educators and special educators with some peer-supported observations. We're also looking to incorporate a bit more early intervention coaching and supports around how we can best provide coaching to our parents in our preschool special education classrooms. And again, along the lines of the recovery of our students as we come back into classrooms, really thinking about what are some supports that we can provide to our pre-K and K teachers proactively around behavioral intervention strategies and resources, knowing that our students are going to come in with a variety of needs after the last year and a half or so as they've been in the pandemic. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Hi, my name is Donnie Bushrod, Director of Inclusion, Office of Special Education. As Crystal just stated, I'll be speaking on points that we experience with our students of secondary, supporting them as they transition from school to the world of work in the higher education. For the 2020-2021 school year, we were able to expand our transition team to include a job developer along with a transition facilitator. The work of the job developer and transition facilitator helps us to ensure that our students are actively connected to adult agencies so that when they leave school, their last day of school will be smoothly transitioned to the world of work by connecting with Division of Rehabilitation Services, the Developmental Disability Administration, or support with the Department of Labor and Licenses. These connections allow our students and our families to continue to receive those supports that they were receiving in school, as they may need those supports once they exit city schools. Another highlight of the 2021 school year was our continued relationship with our College and Career Readiness Office. We provided professional development to not only to IEP chairs, but to school counselors and work-based learning coordinators. As we plan those professional development activities, we ensure that we are connecting students' activities, their interests, and their preference from their IEP to the plans that they would like to do once they leave our school. Which leads us to work for 21-22 school year. We want to provide greater opportunities for students in the world of work, partnering with our community partners, our business associates, our community colleges, our local colleges, and our training programs. We want to ensure that students have viable opportunities to continue their education and continue to gain those skills and concepts that they need in order to have independent lives after they leave Baltimore City schools. And additionally, we're focused on connecting our families with these supports. We will have parent sessions that will center around benefit and financial counseling to ensure that our parents are receiving up-to-date information that will help their students transition from school to work. So these are some of the things that we were able to do in 2021 and plans that we have for our 21-22 school year. Next, I will turn the presentation over to hear more information regarding our access, equity, and progress.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jalima Alisea, and I am the Director of Specialized Learning for City Schools in the Office of Teaching and Learning. I'm going to share with you a little bit of information about what we've done for this last school year and what we plan to do in the upcoming school year to support the special education priorities that Dr. Brooks had shared, as well as our alignment to the MSDE imperatives. So for this school year, 2021, we were able to provide professional development aligned to specially designed instruction for a variety of stakeholders within city schools. We do monthly inputs for our IEP chairs to really build their capacity around academics and content, as well as data, all aligned to support specially designed instruction. We provide professional development to our special education teachers as well as our general education teachers to really build their capacity around specially designed instruction, and in order to ensure more inclusive opportunities for our students with disabilities. This year we also had a trajectory of professional development to build the capacity of our CTE teachers so that they clearly understand how to implement specially designed instruction and support the needs of students with disabilities within the CTE classes. And then we also had opportunities for district stakeholders to continue to grow their professional development and their capacity around specially designed instruction. This fall, we held a PLC for our teachers around instructional technology. We wanted to ensure that teachers had an opportunity to come together and really dig into some of the instructional technology tools and understand the best practices of how to use those tools so that students could still receive their specially designed instruction virtually. And so we were able to do that fall PLC to really build that capacity with our teachers. The Specialized Instruction Office has also developed guidance and resources to support the implementation of specially designed instruction. For this upcoming year, we have plans to develop a trajectory, have started to develop a trajectory for our novice special education teachers so that they are well prepared to be able to support our students within city schools. We also will continue professional development and coaching around specially designed instruction, really focusing again this year on co-teaching to ensure that our co-teaching partners, our general and special education teachers, understand best practices of co-teaching to support inclusive opportunities, as well as some of those high-yield strategies that are supported by research that show that they are aligned to growth for students with disabilities. We also are continuing to develop partnerships with our teachers. In the past, we've brought in our teachers in to facilitate professional development. Teachers want to hear from their peers. So for this upcoming year, we still plan to do that, but we want to bring our teachers in earlier. So we're really having those partnerships with teachers, and teacher voice is really driving the development as well as the facilitation of peer-led professional development opportunities, as well as a continued focus on instructional technology. We want to ensure that, you know, those tools that our teachers built their capacity around this past school year continue in the brick and mortar setting, and they continue to use those instructional technology tools to support students with disabilities. And I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Mabry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Mabry. I'm the Director for Due Process and Non-Public in the Office of Special Education. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information around the supports we provided in an area of discipline. The Office of Special Education provided professional development for school teams on de-escalation and proactive behavior strategies and supports. Due to the pandemic, de-escalation training was held virtually during this past year. We began by providing virtual training for staff supporting our in-person learning sites. And beginning the fall of 2021, we continue virtual trainings on Saturdays. To date, we've held virtual trainings during the months of September, November, February, April, May, and we have a training this upcoming June. We have provided training to over 450 participants, which includes our special education teachers, our general education teachers, ITAs, administrators, paraeducators, educational associates, ESOL teachers, IP chairs, and related service providers. Also for the 2020-2021 school year, our behavior consultant team developed a systemic behavior manual. The work group developed a systemic behavior manual to support schools with the development, implementation, and monitoring of FBAs and BIPs, functional behavior assessments, and behavioral intervention plans. For the 2021-2022 school year, we will continue to offer systemic de-escalation trainings, and we will also provide systemic PD regarding development, implementation, and monitoring of our FBAs and BIPs. Thank you.
So thank you, team, for providing that update and the work ahead. So as you've heard, we're going to continue to provide support to our general educators and special educators to increase access for all of our students that are receiving specially designed instruction to have more inclusive opportunities. In doing so, providing those professional learning opportunities for our teachers and related service providers, and working with our administrators to make sure that those staff have opportunities for collaborative planning. Also making sure that we're including students with their typical peers, whether they're receiving their instruction virtually or in person. Also ensuring that all students have opportunities and access to mental health supports, not just students that are receiving specially designed instruction, but all students, as we know that as students are returning, that they're going to need some increased mental health supports, and differentiating those mental health supports based upon the school community needs. Also, as we begin and continue to hear from our stakeholder work groups and our stakeholder feedbacks around the 3R work, to include what that looks like for our students with disability, to continue to provide high quality instruction for all of our students, regardless of where they're receiving their specially designed instruction, to ensure free, appropriate public education for all of our students. So again, we thank you for taking the time to hear our updates for special education, and we look forward to continuing to provide FAPE for our students and supports for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks, and thank you to your team that has certainly been working hard. certainly want to just acknowledge your work, right? And acknowledge your commitment, your time, your dedication, your belief in our children, and your belief in our staff. I think that's important as we've gone through one hell of a year, to say the least. So I really just want to start out by saying that. And the presentation, all of the information, I appreciate all of the different pieces and all of the folks that were a part of this work. And it's really important. And one thing that I find fascinating are those assessment centers that you all initiated this year. There was a number between the appointments versus the ones that were actually scheduled. Can you touch on that just a little bit? Because there seemed to be more appointments than actual scheduled assessments. So can you just very briefly just touch on that?
Sure will. So what happens is we work very closely with the IEP chairs and with families. So the IEP chair and the family may schedule a time, and then the family may not show for any reason. We did work with the Office of Pupil Transportation so that transportation would not be a barrier. So if a family said, I need transportation, we did provide the transportation. But it may be that the family just did not show that day. And so it was scheduled, but the child did not come in for that assessment. So that's where you may see the disconnect as far as the scheduling and then the actual assessments that were actually completed. But we scheduled multiple appointments, but then we gave you the actual number that were actually completed, those assessments that were actually completed. And we will continue to have assessment centers even in the summertime. So we will have one on the east side and one on the west side, because as you know, the formal assessments could not be completed virtually for validity reasons. And so we just knew that we needed to make sure we got the students assessed for initials, as well as reevaluations. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided the opportunity for families to be able to have their students assessed.
That's helpful. So with students that may, for whatever reason, continue in the virtual setting moving forward, will those students go back to their home school for any type of assessment in that regard?
So yes, so if a student is going to be receiving virtual learning because for any reason that may be the parents' wish, and that is the student's mode of instruction, and it's appropriate for them to receive FAPE that way, and they're up for reevaluation, and it's determined that they need a formal assessment, then they will go back to their home school to receive that assessment by the related service provider, to receive that assessment and or special educator. Yes.
That's helpful. And so it makes me just think about, as we move forward, and I know we have to get ready for the next presentation, but as we move forward in the fall, I think about the potential of students being recommended for special education services. I won't say at alarming rates. I can just foresee it. I can foresee it because students have been away for a while, and what some may view as a potential challenge may not actually be, especially in this space where we're agreeing on standards, right? We're looking at how we're going to measure student growth and progress as we're moving into this different space. So how are we prepared to, with that in mind, anticipating the potential of that, how are we prepared for that, if my question is making sense?
No, your question is making a lot of sense. And this is when that collaborative work comes into play. So the collaboration with the Office of Special Education and the Office of Teaching and Learning, and also part of that work when we're talking about recovery services, so that we know that there are students that are going to need recovery services, but it does not mean that they're going to need specially designed instruction for the fall. It also means that we looking at student plans for students, but not IEPs for students.
Right.
So how we're utilizing student support teams to look at what interventions and what academic or behavioral support students may need, so that we're not over-identifying students. So you heard us talk about providing mental health supports for all students, so that we're not having students identified to receive specially designed instruction only so that they can get those mental health supports. So this is something that we are working collaboratively with our partners in teaching and learning, so that we're not over-identifying students, because we know that there are students that are going to come back with even new behaviors that they did not have pre-pandemic, but it doesn't mean that they're now students that need to be identified.
I appreciate that. And as clear as we can possibly make that across the board, I think will be helpful for everyone. As you're mentioning this collaborative approach to moving forward, I think we just all have to be on that same page. And I appreciate the work that you all are focusing on around mental health and a holistic approach to taking care of our children, because every time I hear from our students, and I know several other commissioners, the students are talking about the need for less generic mental health, all of these things that we have now created to believe are helpful as it relates to mental health and wholeness. When I talk to students, it's just now going through the motions versus actually tending to their mental health needs. So I'm really glad to hear that. And just hearing the voices of our students in the back of my brain, we've just got to step it up a bit so that our approach to mental health support and our approach to wholeness for students is authentic and not just something to do just to say that we're doing it. So I appreciate the presentation, Dr. Brooks, and your team. Thank you to your great team. And although you should be proud, you all certainly know that we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us.
Yes, we do. And
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely. So take care. And I appreciate the work, Dr. Brooks, as always. And now it seems like we are ready for our social studies update. We have 3. So, and I know that we just heard from Ms. Francis, but I know that we're going to hear from her again for the early learning update. Hey, Janice. Hey, Ms. Lane. It's good to see you. So
good
we
to
are
see you.
now, we are now ready for our social studies update. And then we're going to move into early learning.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. I'm just going to do a quick intro for social studies. Super excited to be able to share the work that has been moving and continuing to build momentum over this busy year, to really think about not just highlighting the work of what's been happening, but to really elevate the voice of both our students and our teachers in this work. As many of you know, our Teacher of the Year current, Sydney Thomas, is from Holabird and is a social studies teacher. So that is a great celebration. Social studies is often one of the content areas that doesn't always get to ride in the front or the back seat of the car. It's often left behind. And we have really been cautiously planning for social studies to be a core function of a student's trajectory from pre-K all the way through high school. So the team is here today to share that with you, give you a little bit of that information. Monica Whippo, our coordinator of social studies, is here, so I will turn it to Monica.
Thanks, Janice. Good afternoon, everyone. As Janice said, my name is Monica Whippo. I am the coordinator of social studies, and I'm happy to share an update on our social studies curriculum for this school year. In this presentation, I'll provide a series of updates to the social studies curriculum since the spring 2020 curriculum review. We're going to talk about elementary and secondary updates, a BMore Me status summary, a celebration of National History Day, and a teacher professional development summary. I'm going to display some sample segments of our ongoing work, but I do want to highlight that the Social Studies Office is still very much in the process of developing and refining our curriculum plans and documents. Next slide, please. In both elementary and secondary curriculum, we have updates from both the state level and from the district level. MSDE that last summer released brand new frameworks for K-5 social studies. This follows new frameworks for grade 8, American government, and modern world history. So there's been a lot of changes from the state level. MSDE also developed an elementary leadership team this year, which includes a Baltimore City teacher. So I wanted to shout out Miss Ariel Anderson from William Paca Elementary. She was Baltimore City's representative on the ELT this year. And they've been tasked with producing multiple inquiry modules for each grade level that help support the new learning that students are going to be engaging with through the new frameworks. Within the district office, we spent the summer building full year virtual scope and sequence documents. We developed them all through the summer, leveraging materials that were both free for teachers to access and also virtual friendly, but also in classroom friendly, which turned out to be great because we did move to that hybrid model and our resources proved to be helpful to teachers throughout. In the summer, a team of 4 of our teachers came together to develop elementary action projects. These are inquiry-based projects that end with students taking some meaningful action within the community, whether that be virtual or in person. And we also developed a new K-5 curriculum map that was developed to encompass the new MSDE frameworks and leverage connections to ELA and to incorporate some feedback from the JHU knowledge map. That JHU map was completed in the summer of 2020. This work was done with ELA previously and they moved on to social studies. So we've gotten a lot of insightful information about our curriculum, from the quality of texts to topics that are covered in each grade, and we're incorporating that information into our decisions moving forward. So let's take a closer look at one of the drafted K-5 curriculum maps. If you can move to the next slide, please. What you're seeing across the top is a timeline snapshot of our new K-5 curriculum map. So student learning will go from the local and the immediate in kindergarten through to the global scale in grade 3. And then in 4th and 5th grade, students move on to chronological United States history topics, particularly around early Maryland. And then in 5th grade, they focus on US government and rights. In our kindergarten example below, we've placed the history and skills unit to align with module 3 for Wit and Wisdom in kindergarten. That module is America Then and Now. So this creates a great opportunity for teachers to engage in the knowledge build from Wit and Wisdom texts like the School Then and Now book, and dive even deeper into the history during the social studies block simultaneously. Next slide, please. This year obviously presented many challenges to what is already a very lofty task of developing new elementary curriculum. We polled teachers in January to determine how often social studies learning was happening in classrooms this year so that we could better plan to accelerate learning next year. Here we can see that about half of our K-5 teachers offer 21 to 30 minutes of social studies instruction 2 days per week. Our guidance for next school year includes 30 minutes of social studies each day in K-3 and 45 minutes of social studies each day in grades 4 through 5. So our support documents for teachers next year are going to leverage that time to expose students to grade level skills and processes that will support the content mastery. So this is aligned to the literacy bucket for the 3 R's plan, because social studies is content literacy. So students will focus on skills including source analysis, evidence-based argumentation, and taking informed action in the community. Next slide, please. As we move into the next year, we want to continue the K-5 work that we started and leverage the revitalized interest in elementary social studies in particular. So for example, we are going to share guidance for next year to continue the focus on skills that we focused in and honed in on this school year. We're going to incorporate the inquiry modules that MSDE's elementary leadership team have developed while continuing to supplement revisions. We're also going to develop some BMore Me inquiry projects for grades 3 through 5, which I'll touch on in just a moment. And we are also investigating high quality curriculum options for grades 3 through 5. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. As with elementary, we do have some key updates, both from the state and from the district office for social studies curriculum. In high school, the state released a new framework for United States history in the summer of 2020. So if you've been kind of closely following along, you'll hear that the only grades that have not been touched by the state so far are grades 6 and 7. And MSDE is actually embarking on that work right now to create new frameworks for those 2 grades as well, hopefully to be released in the next few years. So we have had a complete overhaul from the state level. Our team, the Baltimore City Schools team, was invited as one of 4 districts to present our current grades 6 and 7 scope and sequence at the coordinators meeting. So we had a lot of input. We got to reflect on how we do 6th and 7th grade now and weigh in compared to other districts to help inform their decisions moving forward. At the district level, just like with elementary, we developed full year virtual scope and sequence documents this summer. Again, those scope and sequence documents leverage materials that are free for teachers and available virtually and can be used in the hybrid model as well. We took the existing BMore Me projects and transitioned them to a virtual friendly platform, changing some of the activities, for example, to go from poster boards to Jamboards. We also required these projects to be delivered at the beginning of the year for all of our secondary courses. We are going to switch that back for next year so that they align more closely with the curriculum. But for this year, we determined that BMore Me really does create opportunities to build classroom community. So we wanted to make sure that that was front and center. We're also revising the middle and high school interim assessments based on feedback we've received from teachers over the past 2 years. One of the things that teachers really flagged for us was that, we have new frameworks, we have interim assessments, we have BMore Me, how does it all fit? So we wanted to make sure that we were very intentional about creating more clarity around the content and skills standards. The state did not create codes for the new indicators and objectives, so we built an in-house coding system so that teachers can pull directly from data link, for example, and they can say, well, this is government unit 3, indicator 1, objective 2, for example. We are also revising the scope and sequence and unit plans with appropriate year-long pacing to make sure that we are, again, including the interim assessment administration, as well as the timing of BMore Me in the curriculum. Next slide, please. So again, to respond to some of the challenges that teachers flagged for us, we're aligning our documents more closely and clearly to the new content frameworks. We're connecting curriculum resources in a more clear and thoughtful way. And again, we're leveraging the free online materials that we sourced for this year's virtual and hybrid learning models. So what you're seeing in these sample documents here is that for high school United States history, a teacher will know that in week 9, they should be delivering the interim 2 assessment. What is not depicted here is, and I'm just putting out an example, weeks 10 through 12 would be where they would receive, where they would deliver rather the BMore Me program. So that's also clearly spelled out in these documents. We also have here an example of a content competency rubric. So for the new indicators and objectives, we had teams of teachers working to unpack those new objectives and determine what it looks like when a student partially meets expectations, meets them and exceeds them, and so on. We're also building answer keys for interim assessments that outline how the content is laid out. All of these assessments, including the interims, the unit assessments, and BMore Me final product rubrics, are going to be aligned to content and skills, and they're going to be available on Data Link. We do want to make sure that we have comprehensive database planning at the school and at the district level to inform PD, to inform where to best support teachers. Next slide, please. From the same poll that we delivered in January, we found that our secondary teachers did have more time for social studies instruction than elementary, but we also know that there are many factors that affected student learning this year. So moving forward with secondary, as we will with elementary, we're going to continue to issue guidance to teachers that focuses on skills in 21-22, which is also aligned with the literacy bucket of the 3 R's. Next slide, please. So in summary, for secondary social studies, we're looking forward to streamlining existing documents and supports and seeing new curriculum piloting firsthand in our classrooms. Which leads me to BMore Me. Next slide, please. Since BMore Me is now going to span across elementary and secondary, I wanted to pause for a moment to recap how this work is shaping up across 5 grade levels for the upcoming school year and beyond. First, for grades 3 through 5, we're going to be spending some time this summer leveraging MSDE's ELT inquiries to try to shape them for our students. This is a state level initiative. So the inquiries that are coming from that are going to be, state level. We want it to make them more customized for our students, and we're going to do that with support of our teachers. And we're going to be building new action projects that look like the ones that we developed over the summer with teacher input and support. For grade 8, through professional development led by our equity team, experts in community responsive education, and through leaders in social studies inquiry, we had a fantastic team of teacher fellows draft a year-long curriculum for 8th grade this year. They delivered some of the lessons in their classrooms as they were writing them, and they used feedback to inform revisions. So that included not just how the teachers experienced this draft curriculum, but also how the students did through empathy interviews and other tools. The new high school U.S. history framework includes topics that we collectively have previously excluded from the historical narrative. So for example, we are now seeing indicators and objectives around topics like the Tulsa Race Massacre, LGBTQIA+ history, and the damaging legacy of the war on drugs. In addition, we have heard students loud and clear. They have expressed that there are particular topics that they want to see in their social studies curriculum. For example, the role that Black women played in the civil rights movement. So we're very much looking forward to using the opportunity that we have this summer to build a year-long high school U.S. history curriculum that leverages the momentum of BMore Me and provides engaging, relevant, and community responsive learning to our high school students. Next slide, please. I would be remiss to provide this update without giving an update for our National History Day. We are so proud. We had thousands of students, teachers, families, and school staff continue to participate in National History Day, and it was all done completely virtually. So students and teachers had to navigate new formatting for various project types. For example, instead of delivering a performance in a classroom for judges, they had to pre-record their performance on Zoom, and they had to use new online software to produce their exhibits. So this was certainly a challenging year, but these teams rose to the occasion. So as you can see, we had almost 3,500 students from 33 of our schools engaged in this research. 113 students from 15 schools participated in the virtual contest, and 18 students from 4 of our schools moved on to Maryland History Day. And I'm excited to share that we learned just a few weeks ago that 3 projects from Baltimore City schools are participating in the National History Day competition. And I also want to shout out Mr. Kenneth Childs of Hazelwood Elementary Middle School. He is the Maryland History Day Teacher of the Year for this year. So congratulations to everyone there. Next slide, please. Another win for this year is that in July, the Social Studies Office expanded from a team of 1 to a team of 2. We doubled in size, and we also gained the support of a director. So we have Kelly Gonzalez, the Director of Social Studies, Fine Arts, and World Languages with us this fall. One of the benefits of increasing our numbers was that we had so many more opportunities to support teachers outside of systemic PD. So you can see some of the things that we were able to offer to teachers to support them in their practice. We had 2 professional learning communities, one to pilot a new curriculum that was also virtual. Oh, I'm sorry. One was a pilot program for the OER project's Big History and World History curriculum. We also launched a PLC with the National Council for History Education to focus on industrialization in Baltimore. We had a monthly newsletter that we released this year. We launched Google Classrooms for teachers, sorted out by grade band, where they could share different strategies and things that they were doing. We hosted office hours 2 times a month. We had teacher-led PD sessions. There was one in particular in March for Women's History Month. And we had sessions led by some of our community partners. One of the better things to happen throughout virtual learning and this pandemic was we were able to just hop on a quick Zoom call with teachers as they needed it. And so we've had FaceTime with a lot more teachers than we would get in a pre-COVID school year. Previously, it was just one of me, and traveling between the schools was always very challenging. So we really did appreciate being able to just get on a quick Zoom and talk to teachers and see them and give them that individualized support that they needed. And we do intend to keep many of these development strategies in place moving forward. Next slide, please. And we know that these professional development and supports were successful because we got really great feedback from our teachers directly. So just as kind of a sample of the data, within the systemic PD, we asked teachers whether they could integrate learning from the session into their practice. We averaged around 86 to 88% saying that they could integrate learning from the session into their practice. 89% of our teachers found that the sessions they attended were valuable or very valuable. So we really learned a lot from our teachers this year. We tried to adjust our support to provide real-time strategies and procedures that would help teachers where they needed it the most. And with that, I want to say thank you very much for your attention to this. The team is happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I don't have much. It was very clear. I appreciate the clarity in the presentation. But I think about beyond BMore Me, how much of the social studies curriculum is grounded in real life application throughout all levels, and more project based. I know that the BMore Me curriculum from what you were just mentioning, there's a project at the end. But a lot of the other assessments, it sounds like from what I heard, there are a lot of interim assessments, unit assessments. What do those kind of look like?
That's a great question. So they model what students would see in state level assessments. So the high school interim assessments reflect the layout and the structure of the American Government NCAP assessment, I apologize, in that there are two sections. The first section is your standard kind of content knowledge. So, selected response, brief constructed response questions. But the second part of each of these interim assessments is called an evidence-based argument set. And what that asks students to do is respond to a compelling question using sources that are provided. So they select evidence from those resources and use them to build, construct an argument. And that carries through for middle school and for high school.
That's helpful. So I appreciate that. When we think of the scope and sequences that you were mentioning, as you all are working through them and planning them, it sounds like you all are working through them with the end in mind, and those assessments that you're talking about in those projects are pretty much leading the way that you're developing the scope and sequences. That is correct, right?
For secondary, yes. For elementary, there aren't any standardized assessments, so we're actually a little more open and flexible, and we want students to kind of build those foundational skills in things like sourcing, determining whether sources are reliable, can they trust what they're reading and seeing, and then thinking about how to take action in the community.
I appreciate that. On slide 3, I saw on slide 3, let me get there. Maybe it wasn't 3, it was slide 4. When I see these C3 skills, and you were mentioning the K-5 connections to Wit Wisdom, with those C3 skills, in the actual curriculum guides that are provided to teachers, do they have some examples of what those C3 skills should look like?
That's a great question. In its current state, no. We are currently, as we're building these frameworks from the ground up, we haven't gotten to the point yet of having specific examples. We are hoping to begin collecting specific examples of student work through things like the action project that our teachers delivered this year. But in the meantime, what we're working on right now is a skills progression. So the C3, the College Career and Civic Life Framework, has these skills broken out by grade band. It's K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So we're aligning to that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I mean, if I were to see as a teacher, perhaps some examples of what some actions would look like for students that are able to demonstrate those skills, that it would be helpful if I'm making sense with what I'm saying. If that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it just would be helpful as you all continue to move forward with this. And it would support administrators as well, right? Or qualified observers who perhaps are looking in classrooms to look for some sort of observable evidence of student growth or how they're grasping with particular objectives and skills. I think it would just be helpful to have some of those. I don't know if it would be appropriate to embed that in a place like this, but somewhere I think it would be helpful. And then finally, I think that the students, you mentioned students and how they were providing input on with the high school curriculum and some of the things that they want to see. I think it would be extremely fruitful for us to involve them throughout the summer somehow in informing the work. Even I don't know how we're structuring our Youth Works program, but to me, an easy way to incentivize input from our young people is to pay them for it. And if we had, I don't know how it's structured, but if we have some students that are in the Youth Works program that could support this type of work, I think it would be innovative. I think it would be responsive, and it would be twofold. It would, in my brain, help them buy into the curriculum that they have to learn from, but it would also inform teachers and curriculum developers on the types of things that we should be thinking about when we're developing curriculum for our students. So I don't know how we're thinking about that. I know that there are several folks on the call that could probably help in that way, but I think that would be something brilliant for us to consider this summer. And then ongoing, just like we have focus groups for everything else. I think that we certainly should be having focus groups and student groups or students included in focus groups consistently to inform our curriculum development work.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much for that feedback. We'll look into how we can leverage some of those youth work students to engage with the curriculum as it's being built. Thank you.
I appreciate your acceptance of that as being something as a nice idea.
Oh, it's I think it's a great idea.
I appreciate that. And then lastly, I know I said lastly already, but when I think about these areas that are not necessarily focused on with a lot of standardized tests, I think about the areas that I focus on, right? The co-curricular subjects, how we focus professional learning and development around a lot of reflective work, a lot of reflection for teachers, and data-driven instruction. I say data-driven loosely because I think that the purpose of gathering data and then analyzing it is to reflect on our practice as adults and inform that practice to produce better outcomes or support better outcomes for our young people. And I think one thing that often lacks in professional learning and development for teachers outside of perhaps language arts or mathematics, we don't spend a lot of time on the reasons why the type of data that we should be gathering, the type of evidence that we should be gathering. And then what do we do with that information to inform instruction as we move forward and to correct some of the actions that we may have had some challenges with.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think that kind of cues me to share a little about some of the work that we're planning, because as we're piloting for next school year, we're planning to pilot the 8th and 9th grade curriculum that's being written. We don't want to just kind of throw it out to the district and see what happens. We want to make sure that we're thoughtful about how that's being implemented.
Okay.
So we do.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. And we do intend, as we launch the curriculum for both grades in some pilot schools next year, to engage continuous improvement and think about how we can see, like, as this is being developed, how are the teachers responding, but more importantly, how are the students responding to the learning, and how can we leverage that learning from them to create a curriculum that's even better before it goes out to the district. So thank you for bringing that up.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you all are doing. Again, as I told Dr. Brooks and to her team, being able to be innovative right now, and I mean, it's a lot of work, but we're in this together. So I appreciate the collaborative approach that seems to be coming out of all of the presentations today, and we just have to keep that. We have to keep that up. So I appreciate your work. I appreciate the team's work, everyone around this. And thank you. I look forward to hearing more updates soon.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're now ready for our early learning update.
Thanks, Commissioner McFadden. We will continue now that we're 2 for 2 around collaboration and amazing work that engages our teachers. We will go for 3 for 3 with early learning. Crystal Francis, our Director of Early Learning, will share both what is currently in the plan, the transition over the year, elevate the great learnings, and then think about what this means moving forward for us, especially with our youngest learners. So Crystal, I will turn the floor to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm back. This is Crystal Francis. I'm the Director of Early Learning Programs and very excited to share with you all of the work that we've been doing in early learning this year and really since the pandemic started. So just quickly, these are things we're going to be discussing today, just the overview of early learning and how we are set up. First, we're going to dive into virtual learning and then into our in-person. And then finally, we'll talk a bit about our recovery. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, in early learning, we are made up of special ed and general education. So we are one of the few offices that really does cross both of those areas. And so we begin at birth. I like to remind folks of that. We service students in infants and toddlers. We have Child Find, which is in our office, preschool special education, pre-K, and then our Judy centers, which of course start in supporting families before children are even born. So this year we saw a bit of a dip in our pre-K enrollment. This was a trend that we saw statewide and really nationwide. Our pre-K enrollment this year was about 70 to 75% of what it was last year. There were a lot of reasons. We had families who were just a bit overwhelmed in the pandemic and really trying to think about how they were going to situate themselves and their students with online learning, particularly young students. Was just a bit much. So we did see a decrease in our enrollment. Also this year, the kindergarten readiness assessment, which is usually administered in the fall of our kindergarten year, was not administered this year because it cannot be done virtually. And we really began this year with little to no prior research on what virtual learning is like in early childhood education. So my team and I really had to be very thoughtful about building something that made sense for our earliest learners. Next slide. So what we did was really think about how could we make sure that we were getting high impact with our students while also not having too much screen time. That was also really important to us. We wanted to make sure that we were involving our families, of course, because without our families, our students literally cannot log on. So we designed our instructional day and our instructional week to include time for parents and teachers to connect. So on here, we have some of the highlights. We did weekly parent meetings where the teacher was actually just meeting with the families in order to kind of set the expectation for the week, access prior knowledge, and to ensure that parents were on the same page about what students were going to be learning for the upcoming week. We instituted weekly one-on-one sessions with students and families with their parent. So really working on that parent-teacher partnership. We wanted to ensure that since our parents are the first teachers for our students, and our students were of course spending so much time at home, we wanted to ensure that teachers are really able to support parents in how their students learned at home. We made sure to provide daily small group instruction into the daily lessons that we had. And we also wanted to make sure that we got materials home for students. As I'm sure everyone knows, ordering materials at the beginning of the year got super crazy. So we worked really, really hard to get those materials home to our students at the beginning of the second semester so that they could also do some hands-on learning while they're at home. Next slide. So here we wanted to just talk through some of the successes and challenges. We were able to get students onto our district technology, which was awesome. Particularly what we heard in the springtime was that our youngest learners often had to share their technology with their older siblings. And sometimes if you got a 9th grader trying to get on and a 10th grader trying to get on, your pre-K student being able to get on was not really prioritized. So of course, the district has done a phenomenal job with ensuring that our students have been able to get access to technology. And we really saw that for our pre-K students. We had nearly 1 million activities completed on the Seesaw digital platform. I'll share a little bit about Seesaw in a bit, but we just saw a really terrific level of engagement with our families. Some of the challenges, of course, were our pre-K students do require a lot of support and logging on. And as I'm sure you can imagine, if you've got something that crashes or you get kicked out of a Zoom classroom, they're not quite as quick to be able to fix that on their own. And so making sure that we could really keep students engaged and keep them coming back every single day was also a challenge, particularly for our younger students. Next slide. So we also had our preschool special education students on virtual learning, and we were a bit concerned about this population because we really do love to have peer modeling for these students. So that was one of the challenges that we had this year. They weren't able to be in classrooms with their peers, which we find, as I kind of mentioned before, inclusion, we find that so important for our students with disabilities. But one of the successes that we saw were parents actually attending the sessions with their students. So parents were able to get the instruction from the teacher as well while the child was getting the instruction. So we've seen much more collaboration between home and school, particularly for our preschool special education students. And our teachers have really just stepped it up. I have to give a shout out to all of the teachers. Of course, we walked into this year a little bit scared, but they really have taken it on and have done some really amazing things online. Next slide. We also have had to move our infant and toddler services to virtual learning. In infants and toddlers, we utilize the early intervention coaching model, which is very engaging for families. It is the provider is actually coaching the family, and then the family is the one who is pretty much doing the services with those students. So because that is the model that we utilize, they actually had a bit of an easier time switching to virtual learning because the work is really between the parent and the provider. And we have seen a dramatic increase in our families who are attending our IFSP to IEP transition meetings. They no longer have to fight for transportation or fight for a parking spot on North Avenue. They're able to really access everything online. They can call into meetings. We've done Zoom, Teams, all of that. And so that has really been really beneficial. Some of the challenges that we had here were because these students are not yet city school students, being able to get devices for them. We have really worked with and partnered with a lot of different community organizations who have been really awesome in providing some of those devices for those students. Next slide. So I shared a bit of this earlier, but this year we actually moved to a new learning platform for our pre-K and K classrooms, which is called Seesaw. Seesaw is a wonderful, engaging tool that we were really excited to use for this upcoming school year. We appreciate it so much because it is device agnostic, so you can do it on a phone or a tablet, a laptop, anywhere, anything. And it really does support differentiation for students. Students are able to have multiple teachers kind of give them assignments. So you are able to accelerate learning when you need to. You can provide some additional support if need be. And so we had teachers and paras and ESOL teachers and related service providers all were able to be in and give assignments. And teachers and students are able to show their knowledge in a variety of different ways. Obviously, our pre-K students can't all read yet, so be able to hear instructions or hear directions and to be able to show a video of their knowledge or their learning or to take a picture of what they've done really was really increased the way that our teachers and our students were able to communicate with each other. Next slide. So in order to prepare us for this entree into virtual learning, the Office of Early Learning provided sessions around Seesaw, our online platform. We also started new literacy interventions this year, Foundations in Integrity, and we just provided a number of sessions during our systemic PD at the beginning of the year and throughout the year. We really also made sure that not only did we provide these sessions, but we also made sure to have Q&As with our teachers. We put out multiple FAQs, just making sure that we were always being as collaborative and sharing as much information as we possibly could. And this year, we also did a modified scope and sequence so that it could easily switch back and forth for students and for teachers, whether they were in a virtual, hybrid, or an in-person setting. Next slide. So I'm very excited to share the family engagement that we've been able to do in this virtual environment. And this is an actual picture of one of our actual students doing some family engagement. It started off with our pre-K and K town halls in August of 2020. They were really well received by the community. So we are also hoping to do those again for this upcoming school year. Early Learning also has a parent liaison who is a parent of a student with a disability who serves as a parent liaison within our office. And so that parent is able to help and support us with family activities and really is kind of an ambassador on behalf of the Office of Early Learning to other parents. We have developed essentially a school year calendar of all of the family opportunities that we've had. We've partnered with Young Audiences this year, and they have done, I think it's bi-monthly activities for us. We have done monthly parent workshops on different themes, literacy, STEM, and this year we also started doing bedtime stories, which is live on Facebook Live. We do them on Sunday evenings, and we're able to send a book home to our families if they sign up ahead of time. And so I did one in December, I read the Polar Express live. We were in our Christmas pajamas, and we all read the Polar Express. And we're very excited that our next guest reader is going to be Mayor Brandon Scott. And that bedtime story is going to be on Sunday, June 6th at 7 p.m. And so we are just over the moon about him reading a book about Muhammad Ali for our students this upcoming Sunday. Next slide. So of course I wanted to mention our Judy Centers. So during this pandemic in this school year, we actually opened up our 12th Judy Center at James Mosher Elementary School. Of course, as you all know, James Mosher is going to be a pre-K to 2 school. So with that emphasis on early childhood, it really just felt like the right place to add another Judy Center. So that center is well on its way. We also this year have been doing a couple of studies and reports as we really want to dive into what is the most effective parts of our Judy Centers. We know that our Judy Centers are wonderful and amazing, and they really do and have the ability to transform a community. But what we really want to do now is hone in on what those specific things are. What is the cadence, how many activities, so that we can figure out how we can share that information with our other schools. And then finally, the Judy Center expansion has of course been built into the Kerwin Commission. So we will be taking this upcoming school year to be really thoughtful about what that expansion will look like for city schools, so that we can be very thoughtful in how we can just continue to do this work at more and more schools. And I will also drop in the chat when I'm finished a report that we had written in September of 2020, just about the work that the Judy Centers did specifically as it relates to the pandemic. Next slide. So one of the things that I really wanted to share was just highlight the work of the Judy Centers. As we all know, the pandemic started and we didn't really know what was going on or how long we would all still be at home. And so the Judy Centers really sprang into action and continue to work and continue to provide support for families, even in those early days. So I just wanted to, I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves, but just wanted to highlight some of the work that they did. And again, this was over just a few months when the pandemic first started, but they did an amazing job in making sure that families had PPE and cleaning supplies when you couldn't find these things on shelves. The day that we ended up closing, I had one Judy Center on the phone call with me, and she was trying to find formula for a 6-day-old baby because WIC had closed. So I really just wanted to share and shout them out because they continue to do such amazing work, even in the pandemic when a lot of other resources closed. Next slide. All right, in-person learning. So we transitioned to in-person learning with a phased-in approach. Our first group of students came back in November, and those are our self-contained preschool special ed pre-K and K students. Next, we had our inclusive classrooms come back in February, and then of course in April, all of our pre-K and preschool special ed classrooms were back together. Next slide. So we did a lot of preparation in order to make sure that our teachers were safe and that our students were safe. Of course, the district had health and safety training. We were very thoughtful in what the instructional design of our program was going to look like, particularly for those first batch of students and teachers that were coming in. We had many opportunities for professional development for our staff. And one of the things that we really found was being able to give staff the opportunity and the time to kind of be honest about their fears and their apprehension, and to do our best to make sure that we were right there with them and that we worked through some of their fears together. And so I hope that our staff felt that we were there and that we were supportive of them. We made sure that when they were out there for the first day of school, that we were out there with them on that first day. And I think it was really helpful. Of course, our classroom setup, again, I just can't say enough how wonderful the operations team at City Schools has been with ensuring PPE and air filters that were ready to go in our classrooms. And this is just a picture of one of our classrooms. I think this is Curtis Bay, I think. And that's just kind of what the classroom setup looks like now. Next slide. So of course we had some successes and challenges. So especially for those first group of kids that came back in November, families really were very happy to come back. And if you'll recall, the students who came back in November were our students who are in our self-contained classrooms in preschool special ed. So really our neediest students. And we were able to keep our students and staff safe in November. So we were very confident coming back in February and April that we were able to do the same. Some of the challenges there were finding substitutes. There's not quite a pool or a whole school that is running when you have these tiny pods of students that are in person. We did have some parent concerns around health and safety. And again, the pod shutdowns, of course, were out of an abundance of caution, but did kind of interrupt the flow of instruction that we had going on. Next slide. All right, so now we are preparing for recovery and what that's going to look like for all of us. Of course, you know, we've got, the district has a huge work ahead of them. And so we're thinking about what this will look like for our students and our early learning students. Next slide. So we have broken it up into a couple of different buckets here. First, we've got re-engaging our families, next summer programming, transition support for our kindergarten students, and refreshing professional learning. And I did want to share that City Schools was awarded, City Schools was awarded the Pre-K Enhancement Grant from the state in order to support really in-person learning and recovery efforts for our 3- and 4-year-olds. So a lot of what we will be talking about today, we are going to be using those funds in order to support that programming. Okay, next slide. So re-engaging our families, we, as I stated in the very beginning, we saw a pretty big decrease in our pre-K enrollment. So we want to figure out how to find our families and how to let them know that it's safe to come back, their students will be safe, and just how to get back on their radar. So this year we have been doing Saturday community outreach events called Find Your Way to Pre-K. And so if you'll look on this lovely treasure map here, there's a couple of locations all around the city of Baltimore. And we have essentially allowed parents to go to these locations and have these experiences with their children for free. So we have paid for this for the on that pre-K enhancement grant, but we have already been to the Science Center, we've been to the zoo, we were at the aquarium, I think 2 weekends ago, and it has been a really wonderful opportunity for our families. We've heard from many families that they have not been able to go to these places because it has been cost prohibitive. So to be able to open that up for them has just been amazing. And we have families who are thinking about science at home and seeing their children as young scientists where they may not have seen it before. So that's very exciting for us. This summer, we also hope to have some parent-teacher home visits. We're going to be partnering with an organization out in California to provide us training on how to do that safely, of course. They can do it in a hybrid model, so we can still do it virtually, but we really just want to make sure that we're getting back out into the community, that our families are seeing us, they're seeing our teachers, and they know that we want them to come back to pre-K with us. Next slide. So this summer, we are also very excited to be offering free in-person programming for our students. We are calling this Camp Curiosity, and we are having a STEAM-focused summer. So we are going to have, it's going to be 5 weeks in the summer, Monday through Thursday. And then on Friday, we are going to have another round of these community activities. Because they went so well during the spring, we really wanted to make sure that we are connecting that to learning. So our students have the opportunity to learn in person with us, and then they also have the opportunity to go out in the community and also learn. So it's really important for us that we are play-based, that we are focusing on social emotional learning for our students, and that we are providing socialization opportunities for our students in a really safe way. And we will, of course, be aligned to the R3 strategy. Next slide. So we are hoping to provide some additional staff for our kindergarten classrooms for those first 8 weeks of school. We know, as you said earlier, Commissioner McFadden, that students are going to be coming in from just a variety of places, and they're going to have a lot of needs. And we want to make sure that we are able to support those needs as best as we can. So we're currently working with some other offices to really figure out how to nail down all of the logistics on this. We will be doing the administration of KRA again in the fall. And so we want to make sure that those students, as they are coming in, just have the best opportunity to get set up in those first couple of weeks, where we're establishing our routines, we're redoing our relationships and connections. So we want to make sure that they are really supported when they first come back to school. And finally, I think it's finally, we are going to be refreshing our professional learning. It's really important, of course, as I think we've all mentioned, that as we get ready for our students to come back, that we are thinking about how we are preparing our teachers for our students to come back. So it is really critical for us in early learning that we're being thoughtful about our teachers having a great knowledge and a great base in their foundational literacy and foundational math skills. So we are partnering with an author who has written a book, this book, Letter, Lessons, and First Words. She is partnering with us in building professional learning for us for this upcoming school year. We're also going to make sure that we're including our paraeducators in this training because they are, of course, they are pedagogical folks within our classroom. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing them to the best of their ability and our ability. And we want to make sure that we're creating these learning trajectories and checking in with teachers in between their learning so that we can see and support them in utilizing this in their classroom with their actual students. Next slide. Oh, not the last slide. So I did want to share that during this pandemic, during the working from home and everything, that I've continued to really work within the early childhood community. So I am actually the co-chair for the Baltimore City Early Childhood Advisory Council. We have continued to meet and support the needs of early childhood, particularly our child care providers, Head Start. I sit on the board for the Baltimore City Head Start. I'm a participant in the mayor's office of the children's cabinet. So making sure that city schools' voice is heard in the early childhood space and making sure that we are collaborating and connecting with our community partners as often as we can. Next slide. And that was the last slide. So thank you all for your time and attention. If you have any questions, I will stop talking now.
I appreciate you, Ms. Francis. What do you prefer to call Ms. Francis or you Crystal?
Oh, Crystal, because my mom is Miss Francis. So.
Well, listen, I appreciate the work that you've done, and you're doing some significant work, the work that you're leading. One thing that and I know that this is not the setting, but when we had a charter applicant come, I believe it was last week, my question to them was really around what did they really know about what was already happening with early learning and because this is really robust. There's a lot that's happening with our early childhood programs in our early learning programs. And the same as I've said to everyone else, I think that staff has done a lot of work this past year in really trying to, number one, stay connected to our children and our families. And it seems like this is something that is at the heart of your work as we move forward, because we have seen a bit of a decline in enrollment for those early grades. So what are we going to do, right, in a relevant way and in a way that is authentic, that really brings those students and those families back? I think that's really where we have to focus. My question to you, two parts. What are you most excited about? Three things, though. Before I get there, talk about the grant from MSDE that was awarded for the 3-4-year-olds. You said the pre-K, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just illuminate that a little bit more? Because I want to make sure that I share it correctly with the full board.
Sure. So MSDE reached out in, I believe, February with these additional funds, and we had a very quick turnaround time. But essentially what they were looking for was in-person support and support for in-person services for those 3- and 4-year-olds. And we could also include transitional support for kindergarten. So as we kind of sat down to think about, you know, obviously if we got all the money in the world, what would we do? We really wanted to do a summer program. What we've seen with Judy Centers is that summer programs are super effective and impactful for our youngest learners. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing that. That support in the kindergarten classrooms was also something that we really wanted to do. Again, because we've got KRA that happens during that time, but also just knowing the students who are coming into our kindergarten next year are going to be, may have not ever even been in a school before. They have spent at least a third of their life in a pandemic inside. So just to make sure that we are kind of prepared for whatever it is that they're coming with, we thought it would be good to have this additional staff. And then really trying to figure out how do we get back out into the community and to remind families to come to city schools. And so these outreach events have been really wonderful. We opened them up to anyone in the city ages 0 to 5. And at the last event, it was after pre-K enrollment started. So we were actually able to enroll and register families on site because we're doing the online application, as long as you got an iPad and a hotspot. So Head Start was there. They were able to enroll some 3-year-olds. We were able to help some families. So it really is just about getting back out into the community. And as stuff begins to open up, just remind folks that we're here and that they can send their students to city schools.
I appreciate that. And so two things. What are you most proud about with the work that you're leading right now as it relates to, of course, pre-pandemic? Because I know that we were, if I'm correct, we were doing some gifted and learning types of assessments earlier on, so we can put our students on a better trajectory as we move forward. I'm not sure what that has looked like this past year to kind of maintain some of that momentum that we started. So that's a part of why I'm asking too. But I want to know, like, what are you most proud of? And then what are you most challenged by as we begin to move forward and thinking about recovery? I heard everything that you said in the presentation and it was very clear, but I just want to hear your thinking around it as you are leading this work. Even though there's a team working with you, you're leading this work. So I'm really interested to hear that from you.
I think what I'm most excited about is how we've been able to I think still stay connected to families. That part has been very important to me. Hearing from, I don't have children, but hearing from friends who have kids and who are working and trying to figure out how to do all of that, really making sure that we supported families and kind of carving out a space for their children, or that we supported families in figuring out how they could take the mundane, like, you know, we're on day, whatever, 392 of the pandemic, and still make some learning experiences out of that. So we have really done, I think, probably like 2 to 3 family engagement activities each month. And so I think that that's been really amazing for me to see that. I think what I'm probably most challenged by is just getting the word out. I think that we have an amazing team here at Early Learning. I think they're awesome. And so I want to, you know, shout it from the rooftop sometime. And so really just trying to figure out how to get other folks to see the work that they're doing, or connect it, or you know, share it so that we can publicize it. We've been doing these wonderful events, and sometimes you've got 20 kids who log on, and you're excited about those 20 because they are excited. But like, how amazing would it be if it was 100? So those are some of the things that I'm always trying to think of. How can we make sure that we are getting early learning to the forefront? And we like to call ourselves foundation builders. Whatever happens here in pre-K, we are setting the tone for, you know, what's going to happen in 3rd grade and 9th grade and all of that. So how do we make sure that we are kind of providing that investment in those eyes right now in pre-K? And back to the question about the gifted and talented work. So we did not do that this year. We had a lot to figure out, but that team did reach back out to us. And so we're trying to figure out how we can reincorporate that back into what our pre-K curriculum will look like in the upcoming school year. What we did last year was really kind of like piloting it in a couple of locations, and that seemed to go well, and it aligns with our curriculum because we do something that's pretty comprehensive. So we just want to be very thoughtful about how we can share it widely with teachers, and how it just can make sense to fit right into their curriculum. So it's not like another thing, but just a complement.
Completely understood. And something that comes to mind, like when you mention connecting with families and engaging with them to make sure that we have more folks at our events, and more folks are learning about our early learning programs. I wonder where families are, right? Where generally are the early learning, like where are the moms that are considering putting their children in cities? Like, where are they? Yeah. Where do they hang out? Like, where do they shop? What grocery stores are they, like, where's the hub for them? Because I definitely think you're onto something in the way that we are communicating. It has to be innovative, but it also has to be relevant.
Yeah.
Right? It can't just be we spend more money on more advertising or marketing, but we really have to be thoughtful in the way that we do that so that we get the biggest bang for our buck. But we really do what's best for our young people. To your point, as we continue to build, you know, opportunities, the foundation is laid at the levels that you're talking to us about today. But if we don't have them there, then it's tough to really build. So it's just something that I'm thinking about. And I know the full board is thinking about it too. Like, how do we connect in ways that are relevant to our families to really inform them on the importance of what we're doing, the value in what we're doing, and then how do you buy into it, right? And I think an easy way to buy in is for everyone to know, similar to what you were saying, what we're doing is preparing young people for life. And for livable wages, right? For family sustainability. And we start that early on. If we do that, we'll be on a great trajectory for success.
Yeah. Yes. I like to say that we make good humans in pre-K. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to make good humans.
I appreciate it. Crystal, thank you so much for the presentation today. I'm looking forward to more of the work. Just like I said to Dr. Brooks, like, it's nice to hear what we've done over the course of the year and what we've really worked hard to do, but the work ahead is it's a lot, right? It's a mountain. We can get over it. We can move the mountains, but we've got to work together in doing that. So I appreciate the presentation today and all of your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are now ready for our procurement agenda.
Good afternoon. The procurement agenda is fairly long today, so I will ask, would you like me to run through each individual item? Or are there specific items that there are questions about that you would like to focus in on?
I know that this is going to, good afternoon, by the way. I know that this is going to come in bits and pieces. There were a couple of things that I was looking at. So I see a few multi-year letters here. And the apex that's on here, there was no defined funding source, but it did say that funds would be coming out of general funds or individual school budgets. So it was specified, but it wasn't exactly specified, if that makes sense what I'm saying. It was vague, the source, but I just want you to clear it up for me.
Okay.
So that I'm articulating it correctly. I think I know why you wrote it that way. I just want to make sure that I'm reading the right thing.
So I believe that's on page 13.
Yep.
And there are a couple of things that we consider when we're identifying fund sources. Sometimes you'll see very specific funding strings where we know exactly what office it's coming from, exactly the amounts and the breakdown. And whenever we have that information available, we provide it. So for the Apex, as an example, that is one where there are a variety of sources that could potentially be utilized to purchase that item. Everything from the general funds and some of the teaching and learning offices all the way through to potentially some of the federal grant funding dollars that we currently have available. And so that was an example of it's a mix of purchases both from central offices and at schools. And we didn't have a specific funding string just because there is still some work to be done on the specifics. But we know that it is something that has been incredibly valuable to the district that we're moving forward with and is part of the planning for the recovery efforts.
Appreciate that. And just to prepare for the full board, a similar question may come up, to just be prepared for that. When I see, there was a couple of other questions that I had that I think that it is Baltimore School for the Arts, the foundation. And I know one thing that what I really enjoy about looking at this letter is the unique collaborations that are being focused on for this summer and in 2021. I really appreciate that. A lot of and I know why we do this, but when we're writing the letter, I know that it has been a challenge to include information from this past year. I think it would be interesting to see work in progress that has come out of this past year as a result of our investment and partnership with the part-time staff. I'm just thinking long-term strategy, and it's something that I know that we can speak about, but that's just the way that I'm thinking. Like, how are we able to bridge the gap between what we did and then this past year, and how the investment that we're making is going to bridge both gaps together?
I believe Principal Ford is available to probably give you some of his overview to that question, and then we can certainly circle back and think about what adjustments to the letter we can make for the full board.
I don't think that there needs to be an adjustment to the letter for the full board. I'm just thinking, well, I don't know. I don't know what the full board will ask, if they will ask that same thing. But Dr. Ford, I hear that you're on.
Yes, I am. How are you doing, Commissioner McFadden?
I am blessed. Dr. Ford, how are you?
I'm okay. So you would like to see some written information about ongoing work over the past year. Am I hearing you correctly?
It would be nice to see that in the letter to kind of inform some of the things that have happened this year, because perhaps there may be some additional needs that come out of, I think of adjunct teaching, and I think of a lot of the supports that a lot of teachers have had to, that they needed to adjust in the virtual space. And I know that we're kind of moving out of that, but we also have been learning a lot from this past year. And so it would be nice to see, would have been nice. It's not a huge deal. But it's just something that I thought about in seeing the letter. What happened over the course of this past year? Perhaps any lessons that we learned and how that potentially can inform the funding. Do we need the amount of part-time or adjunct teachers as a result of us being virtual? What does it look like? Any comparison from what has happened previously before the pandemic and what has happened in the year, and how can that inform the way that we move forward?
I can certainly provide some information about some of the projects that were done. As I'm sitting here thinking back to September or August, I had no idea that we would be here in June without all our children in our school buildings. That just didn't even seem possible. So my goal with that cohort of faculty members kind of connects to a statement I remember Congressman Cummings making often, that it's not that whether we'll come through the storm, but what will we be like once we've gone through the storm, and trying to make our community whole after coming through that storm was a principal goal. I've got to say that our kids were incredibly excited about being able to engage in artistic work, being able to engage in collaborative work. So once that became more available to them, there was a lot of interest. I would also say that particularly in fields like dance, there was some real innovation with video representations and increasing creative space for young people in dance, which was really exciting for me to see. It was exciting for me to see back in October or November, well-produced dance presentations where they were dressed in their own clothes, being their own selves. That kind of gave me chills, because that's something we hadn't explored adequately before. So I can certainly write some things like this.
Yeah, that it would be helpful to see as we start to reimagine what things can look like as we're moving forward. I appreciate that, Dr. Ford. And then the final thing is, when I look at the demographics of the faculty, the part-time faculty, I know that this has been a reoccurring topic when we've discussed the amount of people of color, particularly on the part-time faculty. Is there a plan to recruit part-time faculty members that are reputable and of color? I know that there are several at School for the Arts already, but is there an intentional plan to continue the diversification of the part-time staff at School for the Arts? For adjunct work that's happening with Twigs is great, and especially the partnership with Bishop Hickman. I think all of that it's great, but it just, when you see the demographics and how the majority of the staff we're increasing the amount of folks that are of color on the staff, just makes me think about the intentional work that is being done around recruiting to expose our young people to a diverse set of professionals and staff members that can support them academically and professionally.
We've definitely had discussions top to bottom in the organization about the need to do that. I think the thing that we need to do is develop some targets so we can look back a year hence and say, have we made enough progress? And that's something I can certainly talk with my successor about, because I've only got a couple of weeks left in the chair. But my successor is really, the person I believe who will be my successor is really very committed to that. And I think setting some targets will be something that person is happy to do.
I appreciate that, and I would be interested in hearing about that, or at least being a part of it. Dr. Ford, also, as you just mentioned, you are retiring, so happy retirement to you.
Thank you.
Yes, and the work that you've put in to city schools. Thank you for your service.
Thanks so much.
Me too. Can I just offer my thanks too?
Allison, well, if you don't mind sticking around for a few moments, I think we're going to have a moment to do that for Yeah, so Dr. Ford, if you don't mind just sticking around for a few minutes, we're almost done.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And Jessica, Ms. Wilson, the only thing, what do you prefer? I want to be
Jessica is fine.
Jessica, I understand why the rough roofers are placed on this particular procurement agenda. It makes complete sense. I don't have any issues with it, and I solicited the input from the other commissioners as well. So as it stands, there aren't any concerns or issues with it. And I don't anticipate there being issues with it before Tuesday. So other than that, I'm fine. And of course, if there are any additional questions, we can certainly send them to you. And I know that you'll clarify them for us.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything that you wanted to highlight particularly?
I think the only thing that would be of note here is that this is the first agenda that has the part of the PQS process items. And so the board will be seeing more of those over the next few weeks and months as we finish out that review process. So I know that's something that is generally a question that we get. Why did they get them staggered over time? It's because we do the components kind of separately. So that would be the only other item to highlight.
Yep. Thank you for that. And before you go, I think as we move forward also, in these letters, and Dr. Dabrowski, it's the same thing that I'm going to mention about the calendar. And I know that we're about to leave, but it would be nice to see the board priorities attached to both these procurement letters and to the presentations that we see. How the things that are coming before us, especially with procurement, every presentation, how it directly aligns to one of the strategic priorities that the board has recently adopted. And I know that we're developing KPIs and indicators. And so how do we align when a board member sees this, who may not have been a part of the strategic planning process, may not be completely familiar with the 3 R's of the blueprint? How are we able to directly see that what we're about to approve spending on, or what we're about to focus on in curriculum, directly aligns to a student outcome or one of our priorities that we agreed on, and that the community supported us in agreeing on. And thank you, Jessica. That's what I was going to mention about how we look at these letters moving forward. If we could see that, I think it would be really helpful. But Dr. Dabrowski, I think I really like the calendar, by the way, the draft calendar. I think it is, it's a skeleton, right, that is able to provide some flexibility and intentionality as we move forward. So I really appreciate it. One thing that I just would like to highlight in the calendar, as we're receiving these updates, that we do hear a bit of focus on early learning. And how early learning fits into, because I see the R3, the comprehensive, I see them embedded throughout the year. I think that would be something to showcase and capture, particularly since we've seen that decline. And I know that our efforts on recruitment are being boosted up. So I would love to see that there. In addition to staff wellness and professional learning, how do we embed those in all of the presentations around the 3 R's? I think that would be helpful to see, in addition to, right, the alignment with our board strategic priorities. Because I know that we're doing work this summer, listening to the community, getting input, really setting the trajectory that we think is going to be most beneficial for our children and our communities. It would be nice to see that embedded in every time that we hear a presentation. I think that would be important. How does the work link directly to student outcomes as it relates to the priorities and as it relates to our immediate focus this coming year with recovery? I hope that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I appreciate the added pieces around staff wellness, early learning, and the strategic priorities. That's super helpful. And I think the other thing you and I have talked about is a real interest in making sure there's opportunities for back and forth engagement. And so as we think about the presentations, to make sure there's space for it within each meeting for the dialogue. So I think that's the other space that I wanted to just name. And I think, one of the things that I noticed in today's meeting is where there have been, folks working across offices on a single presentation. And I want to lift that up as a best practice for us going forward too. So I think exactly how we think about these different buckets in one comprehensive presentation with that space for dialogue.
I love that, because we don't need 30 presentations at a meeting if there is cross-functional and collaborative work happening. How can everyone touch on their piece? And I think that the way that the calendar looks right now, it will allow that to happen in ways this year, that we can perhaps build on in the future. So it makes a lot of sense. And I know that Chief Perkins Cohen was present. So Chief, can you come back? I know that there are some recognitions and some celebrations that we want to make mention of. So Chief Dabrowski, Dr. Dabrowski.
Yes, well, I mean, if Chief Perkins Cohen wants to first do a shout out for Dr. Ford, I want to do that. And then there are a couple here from the Office of Teaching and Learning that I'd love to highlight as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Allison.
Oh, good. I'll probably chime in on those too. So yeah, so glad. I'm sorry, I was dealing with a prom emergency with my youngest son. So then I heard Dr. Ford. I was like, oh, I hope I'm not missing it. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Principal Ford, for your service at BSA and how much I've enjoyed working with you and how much of a difference it's made in the school community. I think you can see it in so many different ways at BSA, from the film program that you got off the ground, which I think is now graduating its first class. Actually, I know that because my niece is one of the members of that freshman class. Which has been just an incredible addition to the school, to I think all the work that you've done to really think about how to change the programming and create partnerships that we've seen at the school. I just think it's a tremendous amount of love and care that you've put into that building, and you feel it every time you're in the building. And so just wanted to thank you so much for your service and dedication to what is just an incredible school, and one that we're so proud to be part of our portfolio, and you're a big part of that. So thank you so much for all you've done for all the students over the many, many, many years that you've worked to make that school the best art school in the state, which it is.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
And Dr. Ford, I want to say that you were one of the founding faculty members there. Is that correct?
I came a year late.
So I came
in 1981.
It's close enough. It's close enough. It's been a significant amount of time that you've spent there. And I know also you were in charge of the music program for several years before you became the school's director. So a long history. Congratulations on retirement. My dad is retired, and I know what life is like for a retired man who has spent so much of their lives to serve in service to other people. So thanks, Dr. Ford.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right, so at this point, I'd love to call on Janice Lane to give a quick note of acknowledgement and thanks to our colleague in our math department.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dabrowski. I think Beth is here. There she is. Just want to say a huge thank you and ever indebted thank you and graciousness to Beth Sappy. She has been with City Schools for 18 years, 6 years in teaching and learning, 6 years working side by side with me as the ED of teaching and learning as she was the director of math. Very graciously took on the role of director after Ryan Reed Salta transitioned, and there wasn't a skip in the beat. Her passion for just not students, but for teachers and for school leaders is something that has been not only shared, but impressed upon her team. I think one of the many skills that Beth owns and does with such an ease is distributed leadership. So she has built an amazing math team that is able to continue the momentum that has been built. And we'll continue to do that work moving forward. So just want to say that Beth has been a huge asset to the work, a huge asset to her colleagues in teaching and learning, as well as across offices. So just want to personally say to Beth, thank you for the countless hours, for the dedication, for the 392 board presentations you've done in your past. And I know that will continue to stay in your dreams in that work.
Did you really count the presentation?
No, that was just a generic number, Commissioner McFadden. You know me long enough.
It could have been the truth. That's why I was wondering.
I know Heather Nolan's here. I'll get her to work on that for us from OAA. But just want to say from, Beth, you've been a model and wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you, Janice. The time I had here, my 18 years, there's a special place in my heart for city schools. So I'm saddened to leave, but also excited about what's to come in the future. So I feel like I'm not going to be far. I know my team, they'll still be my team for a long time, and my teachers and my students. So I feel like I'm far, but I'll still be near, because I know I don't know how to say it other than city school. I mean, I feel like it's my home, right? This is my family. So I'm sad to leave, but also excited about my new adventure. And I will say my kids are excited, because now I think in their heads, they're still young enough to not understand everything. So they think that now they have mommy full time every day for the rest of their life. So I'm going to try to give that to them for a little bit here.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to city schools, Beth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Beth. I'm going to really miss you and working with you. And we've been so fortunate to have your talents for so long. So thank you so much for your dedication to our students and all the improvements you've made to the math programming. So thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Beth. All right, and if I could get Janice to put your camera back on, Janice, come on back. I do want to take a moment.
Can I say no?
You cannot. I want to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge Janice Lane. She's going to be with us through the end of the month, and yet I know this is the final teaching and learning board meeting for you to be part of, and you have been such a leader in this space, even as we think back to today and the way in which you have shepherded so much work in the Office of Teaching and Learning and for city schools. Under your leadership over the last 11 years, you have brought to our children high quality curriculum, high quality professional development, outreach to partners in support of our work. And I just want to publicly acknowledge all the good things you have brought and the spirit that you bring to this place, your collaboration, your responsiveness, your determination to serve students. And also I have to just acknowledge the work you've done with adults and the way in which you have created a space for your teachers and your colleagues in teaching and learning. And I think I just want to say thank you on behalf of city schools. And I know you're going to get lots of shout outs in the chat. I promised I would keep it short and sweet. So I won't say anything else, Janice, but thank you.
I will just say thank you super fast, because I feel like Beth has mastered this no tier thing, and I'm really, really trying it. I would echo the words she shared. City schools is family, and you guys all mean so much to me. So that's enough of the sadness and the greatness. But I've been an honor to be here with you all, and we'll continue to do that. So thank you. And that's it from me, because if not, it'll be uglier than it is now, right? Crystal's seen it really ugly, so I'm going to pull it together.
Thank you so much, Denise. I'm going to miss you so much, and it's been an honor to work with you. So we've been so fortunate to have you here, and all the dedication and the hours and endless time that you put into trying to figure out how to support our students and our teachers and our schools. And so you're just tireless. So thank you so much for everything you've done for city schools.
Thank you, Allison.
This is hard work. It's hard work, right? And you put in some time, Janice. So well wishes, best wishes to you and all of your future endeavors. I know that you're going to stay connected to folks. So of course we say this is not the end, because all of us have, if you're in this work, you're in it. We hope for our children and for our future. And if you are, the work never stops. So I appreciate you, everyone that is transitioning. I definitely think, and I appreciate you, Chief Dabrowski, for wanting to make sure that we took some time today to do this, because we can get busy in the work. But this is also, as Crystal said, it's human work, right? It's hard work, but we're dealing with people every single day. And we have to be those who model that human work all the time, even when you leave and when you're transitioning. So thank you everyone for your service. I don't even know when the next meeting is. It is July the 6th. It is July the 6th. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at that next meeting. And I wish everyone a great rest of your day. Enjoy your evening. Make sure that you maintain some balance in your life. I know that we went over a few moments, but hopefully we won't continue to do that. Today was a bit special, so we had to make sure that we stopped and acknowledged the work and the service of folks today. So everyone take care, stay well, and we will see you all soon.